The day you stopped responding, their power started crumbling. No dramatic showdown, no final speech, no grand exit, just silence, pure unshakable silence. They waited for your usual reaction, ready, with their scripts and manipulations, but you gave them nothing, the kind of nothing that rattled their existence, the kind of nothing that echoed louder than any word you could have spoken. It was the silence that terrified them more than any outburst or defiant confrontation. It was the silence that cracked open the fortress they had built around you. It was the silence that broke the chains they had wrapped around your mind and heart for so long. For years they had held you captive in their twisted narrative, where your worth was defined by their judgments and your emotions were weapons they could wield against you at will. They told you that your feelings were wrong, that your pain was an inconvenience, that your needs were burdens they didn't want to carry. They convinced you that your anger was too much, your sadness too draining, your silence too loud to be tolerated. And for years you bent under that weight, believing you had to carry their burdens, their desires, their judgments. You were taught to silence yourself, to erase your own voice, and to suppress every instinct that told you something was wrong, something was broken. But when you stopped responding, you shattered the walls they had built around you. You stopped playing their game, and in that moment, you broke the cycle of abuse. They had thrived on your response. They had become intoxicated by your vulnerability. It gave them a sense of control. It gave them power. They were masters of manipulation, knowing just the right buttons to push, to make you feel small, to make you feel insignificant. But when you stopped, when you ceased to give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply their words and actions had cut you, their control began to slip away. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't grasp it, because they had never learned to exist without the constant ebb and flow of your reactions, your emotions, your pleas for relief. They had never learned to confront their own demons, so they projected them onto you, forcing you to carry the weight of their misery, their rage, their insecurities. But you broke free. You refused to carry their burden any longer. It wasn't easy to stop responding. It wasn't easy to quiet the voice inside your head that screamed for justice, that screamed for answers, that screamed for recognition of the pain you had endured. But the day you made that decision was the day you reclaimed your power. It was the day you chose yourself over them. The day you chose healing over misery. The day you chose peace over the chaos they had created around you. You knew that no amount of words, no matter how sharp or clever, would change anything. It was all a cycle, a never-ending loop of manipulation and control designed to break you down. And when you stopped responding, you took the first step toward breaking free from that cycle. You knew that your silence would be the weapon they could never fight against, because silence cannot be manipulated, it cannot be twisted, it cannot be used to control you. You didn't need to scream for justice. You didn't need to beg for validation. You didn't need to explain your pain over and over again. For them to understand the truth, they had already heard it, but they had chosen to ignore it. They had chosen to believe their lies were stronger than your reality. But your silence was a refusal to play their game any longer, and that is where their power broke. That is where they lost their hold over you. It wasn't in a dramatic confrontation or a grand exit. It was in the quiet refusal to engage. It was in the refusal to play the part they had written for you, the refusal to continue being the victim in their twisted narrative. They had tried to make you believe that you were nothing without them, that you were worthless without their approval, without their validation. But in your silence, you proved them wrong. In your silence, you found your own voice, your own strength, your own truth. They no longer had a hold over you, because they could not silence you anymore. They could not control you with their words or their actions. because you had learned that your worth was not determined by their abuse or their neglect. Your worth was not defined by their cruelty. Your worth was yours to claim, and you did. In their desperation, they tried to provoke you. They tried to drag you back into the drama they had created. They tried to bait you with their anger, with their manipulation, with their false promises, but you stayed silent. You held your ground. You refused to let them have the satisfaction of seeing you react because you knew that your silence was not weakness, it was strength. It was the strength of knowing that you no longer needed to engage with their toxic behavior. It was the strength of understanding that you had nothing left to prove, to them or to anyone else for that matter. The moment you stopped responding, you became a force they could no longer comprehend. They were left with nothing to hold on to, no power over you, no means to manipulate your emotions, no way to twist the truth to fit their narrative. They had relied on your reactions to sustain their sense of control, but without them, they were nothing. They were exposed for the weak, fragile people they truly were, and in that exposure their control crumbled. They couldn't understand how their tactics no longer worked, how their insults no longer hurt, how their lies no longer affected you. But that was the power of your silence. It was the power of breaking free from the cycle of abuse. They had expected you to fight back, to yell, to beg for understanding, but you gave them nothing. You gave them the one thing they could never fight against: your absence. Your refusal to engage in that silence spoke volumes. It spoke of strength. It spoke of resilience. It spoke of a person who had finally come to understand their own worth, their own value, their own power. They had tried to break you. They had tried to wear you down. But your silence was the ultimate act of defiance. It was the final blow to their twisted sense of control, because it made them realize that no matter how hard they tried, no matter how much they manipulated, no matter how much they tried to make you feel small, you could never be broken again. In that silence, you took back your life, you took back your peace, you took back your soul, and in doing so, you broke the cycle of abuse that had haunted you for so long. You no longer needed their validation. You no longer needed their approval, because you had found the truth within yourself. You had found the courage to stand alone and to walk away from the toxic hold they had over you. Your silence was your freedom. It was your strength. It was the key that unlocked the door to your healing, and it was the moment that marked the beginning of your journey back to yourself. They may never understand what happened. They may never comprehend the depth of your silence. They may continue to try to manipulate and control others, but they will never be able to do that to you again, because you know now, you know that your silence was not weakness. It was the loudest statement of strength you could ever make. You chose not to fight, not because you were afraid, but because you knew that fighting would only drag you back into their twisted world. You chose to walk away, not because you couldn't stand up for yourself, but because you had already risen above them. So let them try to understand. Let them try to make sense of your silence. But know this: your silence was the greatest victory of all. It was the moment you reclaimed your power. It was the moment you broke free from the chains they had tried to bind you with. It was the moment you stopped being their victim and started being the hero of your own story. For too long, the narrative had been dictated by forces outside of your control. The voices that sought to break you, to mold you into something you weren't, had been loud, unyielding, and relentless. But what they failed to understand was that heroes aren't born in the grand gestures or epic battles. Heroes are forged in the quiet moments, in the decisions made when no one is watching, when no applause follows, when it's just you and your own strength facing the darkness of your past. The moment you chose silence, you took that first step, and in that moment, You became the one who wrote the next chapter of your life. You had lived so long in the shadows of their dominance, walking in fear of their words, their actions, their manipulation. Every time they told you who you were, you believed them. Every time they took your voice away, you let it happen. Every time they placed the weight of their emotional turmoil on your shoulders, you carried it, thinking that was your role, your duty. But now, you see that it was never your burden to bear. You were never meant to be a vessel for their darkness. You were meant to be the one who would rise above it, to walk a path untouched by the lies they tried to convince you were true. When you stopped responding, you stopped feeding the cycle. You broke the chains that had held you prisoner. You didn't need to announce your liberation to the world. It wasn't about their recognition or validation. You didn't need to explain yourself to anyone. Your silence was your freedom, and it spoke volumes. It was the declaration that you had finally reclaimed your power, a quiet but unshakable statement that the pain they inflicted on you would no longer define who you were. In that silence, you became the architect of your own reality. They believed that they held the keys to your future, that they could control the course of your life with a few well-chosen words, with a few calculated emotional manipulations. But the truth is, they never had control. They only held the illusion of it. And when you stopped playing their game, when you stopped reacting to their provocations, their power over you slipped away like sand through their fingers. The walls they had carefully constructed around you began to crumble. What they had built wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, and your silence was the wind that blew it all down. They tried to provoke you. They tried to bait you with accusations, with guilt, with anger. But each time, you held your ground. Each time, you refused to engage, refused to lower yourself into the pit of their manipulation. They thought they could make you doubt yourself again, make you question your worth. But you knew better now. You knew that you didn't need their approval, their attention, or their love to be whole. You were already whole. You were already enough. Their tactics, so familiar to you for so long, became hollow. The more they tried, the more they revealed their own weaknesses. They tried to make you believe that without them, you would be lost, that without their influence, you would fade into nothingness. But you proved them wrong. Your silence wasn't an absence. It was the beginning of something new. It was the ground from which your true self began to grow. It was the moment you stopped allowing them to dictate your narrative, and in doing so, you rewrote the story from one of pain, dependence, and fear to one of strength, independence, and freedom. You were never the person they tried to make you believe you were. You were never their victim, their punching bag, their tool for their emotional release. You were never meant to be a character in their twisted plot. You were meant to be the protagonist in your own journey. The moment you stopped responding to their abuse, you finally gave yourself permission to live as your authentic self. You gave yourself permission to heal, to grow, to rise above the toxic patterns they had forced you into. And it was in this new chapter that your true power emerged. As you began to walk away from the pain they caused, you began to notice something incredible happening within yourself. The scars they had left on you, the wounds that once seemed impossible to heal, began to close. They didn't vanish completely. No, but the power they had over you started to fade. The pain no longer dictated your every move. You began to see the beauty in your own resilience, the strength that had always been inside you, buried beneath the layers of trauma, beneath the layers of their control. And with each passing day, that strength grew. You became the person who could face the world, not in spite of your pain, but because of it. Your silence was a testament to your healing, to the fact that you no longer needed their approval, to know who you were. You started to reclaim the pieces of yourself that had been lost in the years of manipulation and control. Your joy, your hope, your dreams. They were all still there, buried deep, waiting for you to recognize them again. And as you began to reconnect with these parts of yourself, you started to rebuild your life. The pieces of the puzzle that had been scattered by their abuse slowly started to come back together, forming a picture of who you truly were. A person who had been through hell, but had come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and more powerful than ever. You found your voice again, but this time, it was different. This time, your voice was your own. You didn't need to shout to be heard. You didn't need to beg for validation. You didn't need to argue or explain yourself. Your silence had already said everything that needed to be said. And now, when you spoke, it came from a place of power. It came from a place of self-worth. You spoke with clarity, with purpose, with conviction, and the world around you had no choice but to listen. In the silence, you found your power. In the silence, you broke the chains that had bound you. In the silence, you rose from the ashes of your past and stepped into the person you were always meant to be. You had been through the storm, but now you were standing tall, unshaken by the winds that had once threatened to destroy you. You were no longer the person they tried to make you believe you were. You were the hero of your own story, and you had taken control of your fate. And as you continued on your journey, you realized something incredible. The more you embraced your own power, the more you saw the truth. They never had the power to define you. It wasn't their words, their manipulations, their control that shaped who you were. It was you. You were the one who decided who you would become. You were the one who decided what your future would look like. And the moment you stopped responding to their abuse, you took control of your life in a way they could never have imagined. Their power was an illusion built on lies, manipulation, and control. But your power was real. It was raw. It was unshakable. You were the architect of your own destiny, and nothing, not their cruelty, not their lies, not their attempts to drag you back into their toxic world, could ever take that from you. You were free. Free to live, free to love, free to heal, and free to step into the future you had always deserved. You are the hero of your story, not because you fought a battle against them, but because you chose to rise above the battle. You chose to heal. You chose silence. And in that silence, you found the power to break free. And in doing so, you proved that there is no power greater than the will to reclaim your own life, your own peace, your own identity. You are the hero you have been waiting for. You always have been. That's the truth that was buried beneath the layers of lies and manipulation. That's the truth that you had forgotten for so long. You were never weak. You were never small. You were never the victim that they tried to convince you were your only identity. The entire time, even through the pain, even through the abuse, the strength to rise was already within you. It had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge, waiting for the silence to shatter the false truths they had constructed around you. You were the one who created your path. You were always the one who held the power to change it. They were just the shadows on the periphery of your light, and the moment you embraced your silence, you began to recognize that light within yourself again. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the world around you controls your destiny, especially when you've been conditioned to believe your worth comes from someone else's perception. But the truth is far more liberating than that. The moment you broke the cycle of silence and response, you stopped being a character in someone else's story. You stopped being a pawn in a game where the rules were set by people who never cared to understand your worth. When you refused to answer their provocations, you created a new narrative, You broke free from the patterns they had placed you in, and you started to write your own future. This wasn't an act of defiance just to prove a point. It wasn't an empty gesture or a superficial rejection of what had come before. This was a reclamation of the deepest part of yourself, a return to who you were always meant to be. Your silence wasn't about shutting the world out. It was about stepping into your own truth without the need to explain, to apologize, or to justify. It was about finding your voice not through loud declarations, but through inner peace. That silence was your most profound statement, one that couldn't be twisted or manipulated. It was a clarity that made all of their attempts to pull you back into their drama seem small, insignificant, and irrelevant. In that silence, you discovered a strength that was not reliant on their approval, their validation, or their understanding. You realized that the worth they had tried to strip from you was never theirs to take. It was yours from the beginning. You reclaimed your sense of self, not in one dramatic moment, but in the quiet decisions you made every day to move forward. You understood that your life is not defined by the way others see you, but by the way you choose to see yourself. They had tried to carve a narrative where you were broken, where you were nothing without them, but your silence spoke louder than any words they could have ever used to keep you trapped in their web. The moment you stopped responding, you didn't just stop feeding into their manipulations. You also stopped allowing them to define the boundaries of your existence. For so long, their criticisms, their negativity, their abusive words had become a cage that you had lived in. You had accepted it, even tried to change yourself to meet their expectations. But the truth was that the bars of the cage were made of illusions. You had the power to break free the entire time, and you did. You let their words bounce off you like water off a stone. You refused to let their attacks be the foundation upon which you built your identity. You decided that you would no longer be a prisoner to their narrative. And so, you took the first step. You chose to let go, to stop fighting their battles, to stop chasing after their approval. You chose to stop seeking answers from people who would never understand the depths of your pain and your strength. You stopped fighting their ghosts and started living for yourself. You began to realize that healing doesn't come from their acknowledgement, their apology, or their desire to fix what they broke. Healing comes from within you. It comes from the quiet moments when you sit with yourself and decide that you deserve more than the toxic behaviors they imposed on you. It comes from the strength to acknowledge your scars without letting them define you. It comes from the decision to walk away from what is hurting you, to choose your peace over their chaos, and to choose your voice over their silencing whispers. Every day you move forward, even when it felt like you were standing still, you were healing. Every time you held your silence, you were rebuilding your strength. The walls they had built around you were no longer solid. They were crumbling, bit by bit, and eventually, they would fall apart. Because the reality is, the longer you stay in their world, the longer you engage with their drama, the more power you give them. But the moment you step out of it, the moment you embrace silence, their world loses its grip on you. You see them for what they truly are, not powerful beings with the ability to control you, but fragile creatures clinging to the remnants of their own brokenness. Their power was never real. It was only real as long as you believed it. So, you let go. You let go of the fear. You let go of the guilt. You let go of the shame they tried to impose on you. You let go of the need to prove yourself to anyone who hadn't earned the right to see your worth. And as you let go, you found yourself. You found the strength you had buried for so long. You found your passion, your dreams, your ambitions. You found your sense of peace, and with it came a deep understanding of your own power. You were no longer a reflection of their manipulation. You were no longer their echo. You were yourself. And in that self, you found everything you needed to rise above the cycle, to break free from the chains of their control, and to step into a future where you are in charge. A future where you are the master of your own fate. It wasn't an easy path to walk. The pull of the past, the weight of the years spent under their influence, was strong. And there were days when you questioned whether you had done the right thing, whether leaving their world, stepping away from their expectations, was worth the cost. But the truth is, there was no cost. The real cost would have been to stay in their world, to continue to bend under their manipulations. The cost would have been to live a life defined by someone else's vision of who you should be, and that cost was far too high. The strength you are discovering now is the same strength that has always been inside you. The courage you feel in choosing to walk away is the same courage that has carried you through every painful moment, every harsh word, every crushing action they took. You have already survived the worst of it. You have already walked through the storm and come out stronger on the other side. You have learned the most important lesson of all, that you are enough, that your worth is not determined by their actions or their opinions. It's determined by you, by the way you see yourself, and by the strength you have to move forward, no matter what has come before. You are not defined by what they did to you. You are defined by what you do now, by the steps you take, by the choices you make, by the life you are now beginning to build. And it will be a life of peace. It will be a life of love. It will be a life of true freedom. The freedom to be who you are without apology. The freedom to live in your own truth without fear of judgment. The freedom to speak your voice without needing anyone's permission. They tried to shatter you. They tried to break you into pieces and convince you that you were nothing without them. But you are not broken. You are whole. You are strong. And most importantly, you are free. Free from the cycle of abuse. Free from the need to respond. Free to live your life on your own terms. And as you continue on your journey, remember this. Every step you take, every choice you make, every moment of silence you choose over chaos, you are rewriting the narrative. You are the author of your own story, and this story is one of resilience, strength, and triumph. You have the power to shape your own future, to build the life that reflects who you truly are, not who they wanted you to be. Your silence was the key. It was the moment you took back your power, and in that silence, you became the hero of your own story. And nothing will ever take that away from you. In the end, your silence wasn't weakness, but a declaration of strength. It was the moment you took back control, broke free from the cycle of abuse, and reclaimed your true self. You're no longer bound by their lies or their manipulations. You are the author of your own story, and from this moment on, your narrative will be defined by your power, your resilience, and your peace. You are the hero of your own life, and nothing will ever change that.